Paul Bros, we lost so bad. I honestly think it's hilarious that while Marvel fans are hating on their Paul and cheering on his death, Invincible fans were cheering on Paul and hating on his off-screen breakup. And shockingly, for once, this is the only bad thing that I have to say about this episode. That's right, everything from here on out is pure glaze because my god did they cook here. First off, we have to shout out Simon Rasiopa. I hope I'm not butchering that name. This guy's the showrunner for Invincible and also a writer, and he's written 8 Invincible episodes, including Season 1, Episode 7, which is a highlight of the show. This one is also a highlight of the show, bringing us back to Season 1 where they would mix and match various parts of the comic to create a story that flows better. This adapts issues 77, 78, and a couple of pages from 79, which contains the abortion scene. Overall, they're arranged in a much more satisfying order. By adapting more material as well as adding story that's really additive to the overall narrative, unlike the house buying Paul subplot earlier in the season, this episode stands out among the rest of the episodes of the season. In the comics, Nolan is present when Thrag negotiates with Mark, and he then leaves anyways. Super out of character, never thought about it before, but it's very good that they changed it. I also like the extended fight scene where Mark helplessly fights Thrag, which is both animated surprisingly well. Hey, is that a smear frame I see in my Invincible animation? And composited with shading that the people are loving, proving once and for all that Invincible does indeed need more than 4 people on their compositing team. The actual scene is not that different from the comic. I liked it then, I like it now. I'll just end off by saying it's good. There's another big change in the show which I'm almost a fan of, which is that Mark's delusions of Thrag killing everyone don't just go away because he made it back to Earth. They persist, and there's a couple of times in the episodes where he'll just snap into it. I like the way that they punctuate otherwise normal scenes with tension. The only thing is that I wish Conquest was there. I know it's not logical for Conquest to be here since he's, dead, but it's also not a rational fear that Mark has to begin with, so I think it would be fine if he showed up. If they had done that, it'd be perfect. No notes. I just don't necessarily buy that Mark getting his eyes squished by Thrag was more traumatic than getting his guts ripped apart by Conquest, in addition to what he did in the finale of Season 3. Also, during these scenes, Lee Pace sounds a little bit weird here, but since he sounds normal once we actually see him in real life, I'm chalking it up to be Mark's hallucinations being weird. Still, there's a lot to like about this choice, not least of which is that they've upped the goriness from the comics in some ways. Additionally, one other cool thing that they do, which honestly I wish they used a little bit more in the actual show proper instead of just these scenes, is the use of blurring in order to make the cinematography and the shot itself feel more dynamic. It doesn't have to be used in this rapid, quick cut way as it is here, but using it on certain foreground and background elements could add a certain level of depth to the shot. I also found that the scene in the beginning where they first invade in Mark's head was well animated, and that's thanks to the tireless efforts of the VFX animators who have consistently been carrying this show. If anyone has any information on whether this was a specific team or an outsourced company who's in charge of stuff like explosions, fire, and the tsunami, please reach out. I'd love to properly credit these people in my videos. Moving on to something else that's new, we have the scene between Cecil and Nolan, as well as Cecil and Mark. It shows an interesting aspect of him that's been explored throughout these seasons, which is that Cecil is not a rational person. Of the two of them, Nolan is objectively the more rational choice to deal with diplomatically, but Cecil only extends that sort of courtesy to people he trusts or people who he views as lesser than him. He tries to act as if he's rational, but in truth, he's paranoid, kind of narcissistic, and a real control freak. He only accepts help from people he views as his lessers, and he tries to keep people he can't control at arm's length. It's always been one of Invincible's strongest trope subversions, having the mastermind government figure being a very emotional person. Of course, he remains at the baseline competent enough to prevent the planet from imploding under the crushing force of the superhero world it lives in, but he's not exactly intelligent. Partially, this is due to the comics where he was a different character, less badass, more of a joke. Him letting Conquest live was part of this, and I think Mark telling him about that would have made a good addition to the scene where they speak. Since they were already willing to change a lot, I wish they added this, but I can't fault them for not doing so. I can only judge based on what's in the show and comic, not what isn't. Moving on to Debbie, We can see that the writers struggled to keep her in the same position, physically, as she was before. It's important that Mark be without his parents because he needs to grow as a person, so I can't fault them for sending her off planet. There isn't anywhere on the planet that she could reasonably be, and Mark wouldn't be able to visit her regularly or just call her. My only issue is that they broke her and Paul up, making every scene with them this season into a massive pump fake. I'm not even really a Paul Glazer like that, or a Paul bro or anything, but this ended up being a total waste of time. I swear it's like 15 or 20 minutes across these episodes that were devoted to these two developing their relationship and trying to buy a house together, only for them to get broken up off screen. I think we could have had a version of this show where she stayed with Paul, or rather stayed in a relationship with Paul and still went on the trip, and then broke up anyways later due to some other natural reason. I don't know. Like I said, that's my only issue with the show. Oh, and also, it is very, very clear to me that Debbie and Nolan are getting back together, and if you think this is a character assassination, then you'd best brace for it. You Debbie lovers are not going to make it past season 5, so get your theories, fanfictions, and copiums out of the way. Finally, of course, we have to talk about Eve. She's fat now in the show, or rather, I should say curvy, because she did not look like how she looks in the comics. I have zero stake in this argument whatsoever, but I will say that I have seen both some very funny memes and some very entertaining discourse surrounding the topic. Whatever you think of it, they very clearly decided to not make her too unattractive in the show, and unfortunately, it just seems a little bit cringe to me because this willing to go there is one of the things that made the comic Invincible special. A quick aside, but if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I plan on making one more Invincible video, maybe two, and then moving on to The Boys. Let's talk about that abortion plot. Obviously, a touchy subject now. It was a touchy subject back when it was made in the mid-2000s, and it probably will remain a touchy subject for a while. I think Kirkman probably extended Mark's coma time to 10 months because he wanted to further justify Eve's decision to the audience more than if it had been 2 to 3 months. It's left sort of ambiguous when exactly she decided to get an abortion, and that's probably the point. To me, it's sort of toothless, but this decision was made in episode 6, not episode 8, and I don't really have a big issue with it. In the comic, this conversation was brought on by Mark and Eve going over to see Caden Immortal. I don't like this pairing, I never have, it makes very little sense to me, and I fail to see how the two of them were able to stand each other, but considering they're both very annoying, perhaps it was meant to be. Either way, this decision got those two out of the picture, and I am very glad for that, I guess. No spoilers, but the part of the comic that we'll be covering in Season 5 will be uniquely fitting for the limitations of the show. I believe that Seasons 5 and 6 will likely be the best in the show, with the sole exception of Season 1, of course, but they will almost certainly be better than the past 3, and I am so excited to see where it's going next.